Ray, if you'd like to start recording, thank you. So good morning, welcome to our 20th webinar, which is just quite an incredible milestone, I think. We started our first webinar right at the beginning of lockdown, so it's an unfortunate little metronome of how many weeks we've been going through this and supporting one another through this kind of unprecedented event, really. I wanted to use this opportunity to say a big thank you to my team, who have gone from not producing any webinars at all to being able to pull together a weekly webinar of what I consider to be a really, really high standard. And your cooperation, the fact that you've joined us week on week has really been appreciated and made this so meaningful. So thank you to all of you, and thank you to my team for everything that they're doing week in, week out, to keep the wheels on the bus and to keep us being able to support you. And on that note, I will hand you over to Jo to introduce today's webinar.
Good morning, everybody. The first thing I'm going to do is to share my screen. Okay, can everybody see that? Lovely, thank you very much. So this being our 20th webinar, the usual things, various sector updates with the latest advice on reopening services and buildings, face coverings, face masks, call them what you will. I'm sure you probably have other pet names for them. Latest guidance on fundraising safely, an opportunity for you to raise your concerns. You'll see that throughout this webinar that we're going to do some polls similar to something that you've done before, and of course at the end a funding update. So I thought I'd touch on public liability insurance first of all, because it's something that I get asked about quite a lot. People ask me, well, why do we actually need it? And the most important thing about public liability insurance is to consider the claims that could be made against you by a third party. And I thought I'd give you some examples. A charity is holding a meeting in their own community building with lots of people present. During the meeting, a member of the public trips over a loose floorboard and badly sprains their ankle. They accuse the charity of poor maintenance of their premises and make a successful claim against them. A charity erects a temporary marquee as part of a village fete. A gust of wind lifts the marquee and blows it onto two nearby vehicles, which sustain scratches to their roofs. Again, the charity is held responsible for the damage because they didn't secure the marquee securely. A charity hosts a treasure hunt in the garden of their premises. During the event, a child breaks their leg after their foot goes down a pothole in the ground. The charity is found responsible because they should have identified that pothole as a hazard. Community Transport Group was found to be negligent when one of their volunteer drivers failed to adequately monitor a service user who opened the car door into the path of an oncoming car, causing damage to the third-party vehicle. So I'm sure now that you get the picture that it's that kind of thing that you need your third-party liability insurance for, and making sure that you've got the right amount. First thing we're going to do next is the poll. Now, as you can see, we're talking about face masks. So I'm afraid all my poll pictures are teddy bears or toys with masks. So can we have the first poll, please? So we're asking you now, what is your current state? Because it may have changed since we last asked this question. So we'd like you to tick, are you open? Are you mothballed? Are you planning to open? You'd like a bit of support for the risk assessments. Yeah, looks like you've all got the idea of what to do. Numbers are going up. I have to say that webinar attendees are far, far better at voting than it is for the general election. Look at that, 88% so far. Can we push it up to 90? A couple more people to vote, then we can bring it up to 90. Any further than that, or do you think that's far enough?
That could be it. I'll just end it now.
Lovely, 90% voted, that's fantastic. Okay, so places that you know that we already have to wear face masks. So any NHS building, that would be doctor surgeries, hospitals, anything like that, banks, building societies, indoor shopping centres, any form of public transport, shops and supermarkets. And we know that we've been having to wear masks in those places for quite a while. But what hasn't been clear throughout all of this is what to do in leisure facilities such as village halls and community buildings. You'll have to apologise for the lack of speed here this morning. Nothing seems to be moving very fast. Now, from the 8th of August, this list is huge. Auction houses. Now, there's been a bit of a question with the auction house, because is an auctioneer a performer, or is he, you know, someone that's at work? So at the moment, it looks as though auctioneers are probably going to have to do their auctions behind a plastic screen. Bingo halls, cinemas have already started to open. Anywhere where you see community centres, take that to mean village halls as well. Concert halls, funeral directors, any form of indoor entertainment venue. Libraries and public reading rooms. Although I think if anyone has been to the library recently, that's a complete and utter change, even when it comes to handling the books. Massage centres, now I didn't know that they are now open, but they're on the list, so they must be. Museums, galleries, beauty salons. Now it says, and barbers as well, and people would think, well, hang on a minute, how would you shave a beard? That's the one time when you are allowed to take your face mask off. Places of worship, I'll come on to that later. Anywhere that provides professional, legal or financial services. Public areas in hotels and hostels. So when you arrive at a hotel, you go to the reception, you'll be wearing your face mask. Once you've got into your own bedroom, you can take it off. Social clubs, storage and distribution facilities, tattoo and piercing parlours, theatres and veterinary services. Although I have to say most vets have already been employing the thing where, in fact, you don't even go into the surgery, you drop your pet off at the door and then they bring it back to you later on. So huge amount of different places where you now have to wear them. So you might just as well think, I have to wear them everywhere unless I'm outside. But if a police officer asks you to remove your face covering, you must. If you are finding that wearing it or putting it on is causing you real sort of distress, then you don't have to. If you're providing assistance to someone that relies on lip reading, again, you don't have to, and Paula will talk about that more later. Not being able to put it on, wear or remove a face covering because of a physical or mental illness or impairment or disability, to avoid harm or injury to yourself or other people. To eat and drink, but then it says, but only if you need to. That to me is one of those anomalies. If you're going to take medication, you need to take it off. Young children under the age of 11, again, they don't have to wear them. You're allowed to take your face covering off if you're being ID'd for, take for example, you're going in to buy a bottle of wine and you're young enough to look under 25, then they could ask you to see, do you actually look your age? If you're speaking to somebody that is hard of hearing and they rely on lip reading, then again, take your face mask off, and that one's quite common sense. And face masks could be removed if you're going to be eating and drinking in bars, cafes and restaurants. And here we have another poll. See, poor Teddy wearing face mask, but as you can see, little Ted hasn't got face mask on because he's under the age of 11. So this question is asking, how are you getting on? How do you feel about the organisations that you're with at the moment? Are you coping? Are you keeping up with the guidance? Do you feel informed? If you want to start voting, that would be absolutely fantastic.
Just going to interject with apologies for the trustees feeling informed. That's a duplicate there. Apologies. That's my fault. It should be our trustees feel informed or do not feel informed. Sorry, Joe, for interrupting.
That's all right. So do the ones that are replying to the "our trustees feel informed" on the second one, are they feeling uninformed or informed? If everyone's looking at this particular poll, if we say that the second "our trustees" should actually say "feel uninformed," and then we can alter that later on when we put the poll out for everybody. 93%. There's 3 more that haven't voted. 95%. I love this. It's absolutely fantastic. Do you think we've probably stopped now? Okay. Okay, this is the information that ACRE have come up with. I know that an awful lot of you have looked on their website for various bits of advice when it comes to reopening your hall. But this is also another bit of information that is really, really useful. So these are places that have been exempted from you having to wear a face mask. If you're going to a normal chemist, then you do have to. But if you're going to a mainly medical or dental practice, audiology if you're hearing, chiropody, chiropractic, osteopathic, optometry, or any other sort of medical services that relate to mental health, you don't have to wear them. Then you've got your indoor fitness studios, gyms, dance studios, leisure centres, swimming pools, water parks, theme parks, and anything that relates to indoor sports, leisure and adventure activities. Again, you don't need to wear face masks, but you must remember you still need to keep that 2-metre distance. So then this is the important bit. People taking part in activities in a community centre, including a village hall, that would normally happen in either point 1 or point 2 above here. So we're looking at the medical practices or the indoor fitness studios. They won't have to wear face coverings, but all the other social distancing rules still apply. So we're still thinking about the 2-metre distancing, or if you need to use mitigation to bring it down to 1 metre plus, that still applies. But for number 1 and number 2, if any of those run in your community centre, then you don't have to wear your face masks. And as I've said at the bottom, for absolute clarity, village halls are explicitly covered by the definition of community centres. You'll find the majority of advice, particularly in the government advice, it tends to talk about community centres, but that includes village halls. Dining out. I don't know if anyone has attempted this yet, but you don't have to wear them in restaurants with table service or bars or pubs. So you can remove your mask to eat and drink in an indoor premises with a cafe or designated seating area, but if it is a designated seating area and it has other facilities around, then you can only remove your mask when you arrive in that area. So as soon as you come out of that area, you have to put your mask back on. So for example, if you're going into Costa, you would have your mask on when you come through the doors, you order your drink and your cake, so you've still got your mask on. You take your drink and cake to your table, you can then take your mask off. If you decide you want to go to the loo, mask must go back on, go to the loo, come back out again, mask must still be on. When you sit down, mask off. When you leave premises, mask on. When you get back out to the outside, mask off if you'd like to. I'm sure that's very clear. So the government guidance does clearly advise what the designated seating areas are, and the fact that if you're going to have designated seating areas, then they should only be open for table service at the moment, along with additional infection control measures. And we have actually got a link for more of that information further on. Places of worship. Now this is a really interesting one. The basic fact is that all congregations must wear face masks if they're able to, but there are slightly different occasions for different places of worship. So if you're talking about a normal service, so things like you know, your normal sort of Sunday service, then you must wear your face mask. But then you've also got baptisms, weddings, funerals, Holy Communion, confirmation, prayer. So gatherings of more than 30 people are now allowed for acts of communal worship in churches, synagogues, mosques, temples, and other meeting rooms in England. But no more than 30 people will be allowed to attend weddings, funerals, or other life cycle events such as bar mitzvahs or baptisms. For Holy Communion, there is no sharing of wine. It will be handled and drunk, and the chalice cleaned, by the priest alone. I don't know if the priest has to drink per person that attends, or whether he just does the symbolic one sip. The bread host, only to be received by hand and not in the mouth. And I spoke to a priest yesterday, and he said that he tries to make sure that when he hands the bread to the participant, or the recipient, that he doesn't actually touch their fingers either. So I think he's had to do a little bit of sort of practice with that. Have to use hand sanitizer before and giving communion, and those receiving it would also be encouraged to give the same. Other restrictions are that worshippers won't shake hands during the sign of peace if they're in church. Roman Catholics have been freed from their obligation to celebrate Mass every Sunday. They won't be doing the normal collection that would go around the church there, and being encouraged to give online instead. In a mosque, worshippers are to wear face masks and to bring their own prayer mats, their own Quran, and a reusable shoe bag. And they're not allowed to touch other people's shoes either. In a Hindu temple, gatherings are restricted to 30 people or fewer, and they're not allowed to do communal singing. In a synagogue, a lot of them are doing online booking systems for attendance. They're not allowed to kiss the holy books or objects, and they're not allowed to do any handshaking either. Face masks have to be worn inside, and singing has to be restricted to the service leader, who will face away from the congregation. Or in some cases, they actually have a sort of plastic shield, because singing is part of their service. Therefore, it's considered okay for them to do that. So that's places of worship. Right, now I've got some helpful links. The places of worship, you saw the link on there for that slide. And then on this one, I have put up links for something called BHIB charities. They're a charity insurance company who have created this checklist to go through when reopening village halls and community centres. Now, you've already seen the one for Acre, This one has a slightly different layout, and to me it seems a bit more in depth, so I think it's worth looking at both of them to check to make sure that you haven't missed anything. Similarly, you might find that the content for their risk assessment in the workplace really useful as well. And we have got these two documents at DCA in Word version if you would like them. And we've also put up there that if you'd like to make your own face mask or covering, this is the government's guidance about how to do it. The next helpful links are to do with restaurants. So this is talking about how you behave in a restaurant, whether you be somebody that's working there or a customer. And the last one that I've put there is to do with staying alert and safe. This is to do with social distancing for young people, and it has been written by young people for young people, and it's a really, really good guide. It's far more explanatory actually than some of the ones that we've had to look at, so take a look and see what you think. And if you know any young people, let them know that that particular advice is out there for them so that they can see and make sure that they're safe. And now we have another poll. We do when my picture comes up. Oh, no, 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 no. That's not supposed to happen. I do apologise. Well, it just shows the links work, doesn't it? Ah. Sorry, bear with me a moment. Technical hitch. Well, there's the poll. So we're looking at funding here. Multiple choice again. Have you applied or not? Or do you feel that you want to be able to apply but you're not quite sure how to do it? Would you like some support? Has the poll gone? I do apologise if it has.
No, we're still polling.
Oh, good.
We're up to 86%. Just shout when you want me to end it.
What number are we up to now?
We've got 40 people have viewed. We've had a couple of people drop out with technical issues, but that's 86%, so I could close it now.
Yep, that's lovely. Thank you. %68% have applied for funding. That's absolutely superb. That's really good to see. Okay, as you can see, our little Russian dolls are socially distancing. Aha, public fundraising. We had this slide up before, but of course now we've got this change that you have to factor in the face masks, which you didn't have to when we first put this slide out. So we thought we'd bring it back again just to remind you that you still have to apply good hygiene and sanitation principles. So the face masks are in addition to all the rest of the stuff that's on this slide. So you've still got to maintain your social distancing. If you can still do the signing and floor markings, giving way to the public, staying as still as you can, because the more movement there is with lots of people in a room, the more likely you are to come into contact with each other, and you're likely to end up with a much smaller amount of distancing. Review methods for exchanging items. So think about the fact that if somebody returns something, you may have to hang on to it for 72 hours in a plastic bag, not to touch it, and then consider, you know, as, so I didn't explain that very well. The item they return would go into a plastic bag, you would hold it for 72 hours somewhere safe, and then you would give them a new item in exchange. Be polite and respectful. Don't apply any undue pressure to everyone. Review how you process your donations, so thinking about cash or online, and also think about how you collect your donor information, so don't forget the good old GDPR. And here we have some more. These are public fundraising links. You've got the fundraising regulator, so that's making sure that you're doing everything legally. Also consider you're working safely during the coronavirus and construction and other outdoor work, because it might be that you decide that you're going to have a fundraising activity outside. So bearing in mind, when I first talked about public liability and I mentioned about the fact that somebody had put a marquee up and they hadn't secured it properly, it's that type of thing that you need to consider. So thinking about safely. And then of course you've got the other government's guidance about staying safe outside your home. So that's thinking about the people that are helping you fundraise. Right. Our little family group of Russian dolls have got together, and they have got together because at this point it's now time for me to hand over to Paula, who's going to give you some further advice and more personal supporting advice, as well as the funding. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and hopefully Paula will then be able to share hers.
Thank you. So Joe, just to hand over the chat to you, the questions have been coming in fast and furious. I've tried to keep up where I can, but if you don't feel your question has been answered, don't worry, because what we do at the end of the session is we have a look at the chat, pick up any missed questions, also an opportunity for us to pick any typos up from what we put in, and we will then publish that on our webinar page. So it will be accessible along with the recording and all of the slides. So please, if you do feel a question has been missed, don't worry. It will be available on the chat on the website. I typed as fast as I could. So thank you, Joe, for handing over to me. So just have a little bit of a sort of closer look around the issue of exemption, which is causing some anxiety for people. The government, when they introduced the rulings on face coverings, stated that they hoped it would give people more confidence to go out. And I think that that's a true expectation, but we know, for very vulnerable people in our community, the face masks can actually be something that prevents them from wanting to go out. And it can get in the way of them taking part in the normal activities, like going along to their coffee morning at the local village hall, or going along the high street and going into charity shops. So we know that it can have an impact. So I just wanted to look at it in a little bit more detail. As Joe has already said, the exemptions are based around a reasonable reason. So there aren't any specifics in law. So if you look at the legal legislative guidance that goes with the face coverings, there isn't actually any specifics around exemptions. And that's also why the government have been able to produce and put on their website exemption cards for people, because actually it's self-identifying that you have an exemption from wearing a face mask. So what do they mean by reasonable reasons? Well, it kind of breaks down into health, age, infirmity, and equality. And those tend to be the areas that they talk about when they talk about reasonable reason. So if you can't physically put a face mask on or physically take a face mask off, then it would be unreasonable for you to wear one. If you have a breathing condition which is exacerbated by being in a mask, whether that is actually exacerbating your breathing difficulty or it makes you anxious and that causes you to feel that your breathing is affected. Either of those would apply. Anxiety, any mental health condition which causes you to perhaps be more hyper aware of other people looking at you and you feel that the mask draws attention to you, which greatens your levels of anxiety, would also be a reasonable reason. If you're communicating with somebody and they're finding it difficult to follow you, whether it be because of lip reading or because they have hearing loss, and actually it's muffling the sound between the mask. If you do take off your mask to communicate with somebody with a hearing difficulty, you want to still try to keep to the 2-meter rule as much as possible. Because of course, by removing the mask, you're actually putting yourself and them at greater risk. So you need to pull back. You need to make sure you're the one taking the responsibility to pull back, which will mean probably needing to raise your voice slightly because you're talking over a larger distance. Also, taking medication. This is one that's forgotten sometimes. So you might see people in a supermarket suddenly take off a mask, or you might have somebody who's in your village hall as part of your group taking off their mask. And again, to be honest, if that's something you see them doing at intervals, but they put their mask back on, leave it unchallenged, because chances are that they're taking medicine, or it could even be that they're just having a moment of anxiety. So where the issue becomes particularly significant is when we start to see a rise in reported hate crime from people with disabilities. All major disability charities are saying they're having an increase of inquiries from their members who are being verbally abused. I think there have been more instances of physical abuse, but there's also been lots of tutting, finger pointing, because the people either that they're caring for or they themselves are being highlighted because they're not wearing a face mask. So as agents to support the most vulnerable, which is what all of us are, then we have kind of a responsibility to protect those most vulnerable and to make sure within our facilities, we've got the right protections in place. So I would say that it would be really good for you to have some printed off exemption cards that are available to people who come to your premises or to people that you work with, because not everybody has access to a printer to be able to print them off. They don't need them in law, but it might make them feel more protected if they've got something on them that says they're exempt. And remember, that's self-identification that they're exempt. You might also want to look at some of the other cards that are available. So a lot of the major charities, so Alzheimer's UK, for example, have got other cards that are available on their site, some of which there may be a small fee, but they'll post them out and they're laminated. So advertising those, making sure that people know about them is really good. Action for Hearing Loss have produced a really good card, which can be printed. It's just double-sided. It highlights that the person has hearing loss. And on the other side, it actually gives a couple of communication tips, which can be quite nice for the person carrying it to be able to show someone. But there are lots of them out there. A lot of the learning disability charities, MenCap, for example, have also produced a range, and it gives them the opportunity to raise funds. So if you are thinking about either use for yourself or you're going to suggest them to groups, it's a nice way to highlight raising some charitable donations for different charities. But it has to be said, they can be printed completely for free from the government website. There will be a handout on our website that has all the links to these charities. In case you're busy trying to scribble down the names of the charities that I've mentioned, there will be a link to all of those. Another movement that's really important to mention is that around hidden disability. And you may have seen the sunflower lanyards or sunflower badges, and staff in things like supermarkets are trained to recognize these, to know that these are people that might need more help when they're out and about. So it could be people with autism, for example, mental health difficulties. So it's a way of them being able to say, I might need more help without actually having to go and ask for help. So Hidden Disabilities, which again is another charity, have also produced some exempt cards, and you can also get the sunflower lanyards. So again, I'm not necessarily saying that you should become outfitters for these goods, or necessarily be making them available to your members, but giving advice about where these things are available is really good. Another movement that I think is really brilliant, which was started in Wales by the Bevan Commission, is Distance Aware. The idea behind that is that for many people, so with autism, for example, find it very difficult to socially distance. And so actually what we need to do is ask other people to distance on their behalf. So again, this is a badge that can be worn, it's a lanyard, it has a very simple message, but it's asking other people to keep that distance so that the person with the disability who doesn't know, the onus isn't on them to keep a 2-meter distance. Parents with children with disabilities, particularly hidden disabilities, have talked about the strain of shepherding their children or their loved one through an environment like a supermarket, trying to keep them distanced from other people, when actually the rest of us have a responsibility to keep back and to give distance to everybody. So these cards can be incredibly useful. So we'll make sure that that is available. It's worth saying that the fact that within the legislation we actually have lip reading acknowledged is in large thanks to Action on Hearing Loss and other hearing loss charities who lobbied the government very successfully to have it recognised that that is a legitimate reason why somebody might take off their mask, so that the person they're with can hear them better. Because that's not about the person with hearing loss removing their mask, it's about the other person that they're having a conversation with. There are also some really good interpretation apps. Zoom has been very effective for supporting people with hearing loss, but actually out and about it's become more difficult for people with hearing loss. They're lobbying the government at the moment to, for safety checks to be carried out on clear plastic visors that cover part of the face mask that goes over the lips. At the moment, quite a few people are making their own, but we don't have any safety guidance about the use of perspex. So Action on Hearing Loss are actually lobbying on that at the moment. And if you wanted to add your voice to theirs, do go along to their website. I just wanted to end on just a couple of communication tips. So recommendations from both Action on Hearing Loss and also the Alzheimer's Society is around keeping any messaging that you're doing whilst wearing a face mask short, simple phrases, and actually use gestures more. But I don't mean gestures as in I tend to flail my arms around when I'm talking, but actually using them in a meaningful way. So if people are coming in and they're wearing face masks and you're wearing a face mask and you want to ask them if they want a drink, use gestures that are helpful, that will actually add to what they might be hearing as muffled through the face mask, or it might be increasing their confusion. Adapt your communication. Think about simple cards that you might be able to have in your premises to make sure that you're communicating things as easily as possible to people who may be struggling because of the introduction of face masks. Tone is really important. One of the big gripes of people with hearing loss is that everybody shouts at them and everybody speaks to them in a cross voice. Because the minute we start to use short, sharp sentences, it gets very angry. So do think about your tone. If you're using short, sharp sentences, the tone doesn't need to change. It doesn't need to become cross. So tone is really important, as is smiling. Don't think just because your mouth is hidden, we can't tell if you smile. We can. And that's really important for everybody, I think. It's a good thing to remember that smiles still count, even when we've got our mouths covered up. And remember that if you do need to remove your mask, or if you're with anybody who can't wear a mask, you really need to adhere to the 2-meter rule. The only reason we were ever able to bring down the 2-meter rule to a 1-meter rule was if there were mitigating factors in place. So we should still be, without any mitigation, we should still be keeping 2 meters apart as much as possible for our safety, but also for the other people that are around us. So hopefully that's given you just a little bit of an overview of a very difficult area. As I say, the handout will be available, which will have the websites to those major places that you can get cards, as well as to the government site where you can print off cards. And I should have said there's also one you can put onto a smartphone so that somebody can actually just hold it up on a smartphone. And the main thing really to remember is that it's self-identified. There does not need to be a doctor's letter. There doesn't need to be something that people carry around to prove they're exempt. The only people that will check that an exemption is valid would be a police officer, and they would only do it if there was an affray or if there was some major incident that was occurring. So on the whole, we need to try perhaps not to judge others that don't wear face masks, to be compassionate, to keep 2 meters apart where possible, to take responsibility for our own space, and to make sure that we're there to also be able to inform the most vulnerable of the support that's out there for them. So I'm going to move on without any kind of link whatsoever, so I apologise for that, to looking at our funding updates. Really should work on my linking. So hopefully that's visible on your screen. Now, I'm not going to read all of these out. These slides will be available on our website, so you'll be able to go on. All of the blue writing are links. So just by clicking on those, you'll be able to go straight to the websites to be able to see all of the major criteria. There's a few though that I'd like to draw your attention to from the site. The first one is the Dorset Council Community Impact Fund, which we're very lucky. We had Ian Wells on our last 2 sessions, who was able to talk about it and give further information. So if you would like to know more, do go and visit our previous webinars to have a look at that information. The deadline is Sunday, the 20th of September, but please don't let that be something that causes complacency. They will know how much money there is left for any future allocations. They'll also begin to prioritise where the money is going way before the 20th of September. So don't hesitate, get your application in as soon as possible. Remember that those groups that are unconstituted, so part of the COVID-19 response, that you are able to apply. You will need to have a partner who will have a bank account that will be able to hold the money for you, but you don't need to be a constituted group. It's just the amount that you're able to apply for is less. It's a really excellent fund. They've gone fully online with it this year, which has actually made the process much simpler. If you are having any problems with that, you can always come back to us for help. The second one, which is being run by Dorset Community Foundation, is their phase 2 grant, which is looking at recovery and supporting groups that are going through difficulties in their response. We know that the economic downturn is having a very big effect on charities, both on their ability to fundraise, on donor support, and also just managing the books generally. So funds like this are vitally important. Just trying to click, thank you. The National Lottery Community Fund, coronavirus support, ends on the 17th of August. That will be the last run. There won't be another run. We've not been told of any further allocation of money on that. So if you haven't made an application, then I would recommend that you do go and have a look at the website. They have tried to link it as closely as possible to the way they run their awards for all and the way they award their community funding generally. So it's part of a familiar process, but they have tried to simplify it. Again, if you need any support with that, do contact us, but again, contact us as soon as possible, because the closer to the deadline, the harder it is to offer support. The Phoenix Fund is a relatively new fund that's been set up, and it's there to support our BAME communities. It has running several deadlines. So if you miss the 21st of August, then the next one will be, and I'm afraid I've got my own screen in front of it, the 2nd of September. And there are several rounds of this that have already been planned. So I would recommend, if you do support people from the BAME community, that it is worth going on, having a look and seeing whether actually this might be something you might want to apply for in future. I'll take this moment just to highlight the advice that we gave last week, which is that you should be doing your plan for your future now, and you should be applying for the funding so that you get that future delivery that you want now. Because we don't know in November, December, what of these funds will still be available. We know that some of the big funders may actually have shortfalls in their funding because they've been so responsive to COVID-19. So now is the time to be applying. Don't put off that planning. You may be feeling at the moment, you may have received a small business grant, for example, have reserves for the first time in your organisation. You may be in a very different position to some, but actually when you start looking at the mitigating factors that you'll need to put in the future, how you can support a community that is potentially going to be more isolated than ever before, that actually you're going to find you need more money and able to put those things in place, whether that's buying computers, offering support for the Digital Champion scheme in Dorset, whether that's opening up free Wi-Fi to your community, or whether it's actually putting up plastic shielding and better signage. So do make sure that you are planning now for the financial future that you're going to need. I also wanted to mention the Lloyds Bank Foundation, which is the one at the bottom that's got a deadline of the 11th of September. This is a fantastic fund. It's open to charities with an income between 25,000 and £1 million. So that puts it into the small bracket. I know for some of us that seems quite large, but that's still counted as the small bracket for charities. The idea behind it is to offer not only funding, which would be unrestricted, which is an extremely rare situation. So 2-year unrestricted funding, but also mentorship along with it. So you will actually get support from business professionals, other charity leaders, to be able to support you to make sure your charity is sustainable. It's a fantastic move by Lloyds Bank Foundation. I would really kind of put my hands up and say every funder should do this, because of course, if you put support in place so that people are a bit sustainable, then the money that the funder is giving will go further and will be used better. It's probably worth mentioning at this point that of course DCA does offer mentorship. So if as a charity you're newly formed and actually you would benefit from assistance around leadership, if you would benefit from having supervision for a CEO or for your chair of your trustee board, those are services that DCA can offer. But of course, it's always nice when it comes along with funding as well. So the other grants that are available, they're very much still around COVID-19, but there are some grants that are open for project work that you're doing. It's just about finding it. And if you're struggling to find funding that isn't COVID-19 related, again, do contact us at DCA. We can help you with those funding searches. So I will just leave those up there just so that people can see the names. But as I say, please don't scribble them down unless it was particular ones you wanted to remember. Do come and visit the website. They will be available on PDF, and all of those blue bits of writing are links, so they'll take you straight to the funder, so you don't need to remember web addresses or anything else. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing. Lovely. Joe, were there any questions that you wanted to share from the chat? You're on mute, Joe.
Can you hear me now?
You can, yes.
Sorry about that. Yes, there's been a couple of questions. Actually, probably the latest one that I was just about to respond to was, we're starting an overdue internal refurbishment of our hall, and I'm presuming that some of the funding on offer will not apply to this sort of work.
So if part of the refurbishment that you're doing is in order to make you COVID-19 secure, so that your premises will be safe with the new health and safety guidance, then there isn't any reason that that wouldn't be applicable. Always remember in funding, no funder will fund you for a hole in your roof or for refurbishment. What they will do is fund you to maintain your premises in order to continue to offer a service to the community. Remember, it's the purpose behind why you need to be there. The advice I always used to give was, well, the simple solution to a hole in the roof is to knock the village hall down. And then instantly people go, but no, where would they go for yoga? How would we get to a coffee morning? They're the reasons why the village hall survives. They're the reason your community building is there. So don't forget, it's not about the building. If on the other hand, you're in a heritage property and it is all about the building, then of course that's very different. And that's a renovation issue that comes under the heritage funding, and there is heritage funding available at this time to help with the restoration of buildings and also support around making heritage buildings COVID secure, because of course that can involve a great deal more work and a lot more expense, because it isn't just about putting a sticker on a wall. It's about making sure that you're not damaging the building with the changes that you make. So it's a great question. Any others, Joe?
Just a reminder to everybody, because it's a question that's come up again. any templates that you need for risk assessments to reopen your hall, we have them. We have got them on our website, and the couple that I spoke about earlier will also go up on our website as part of the presentation that I did earlier. If you're having any difficulties finding them, then get in touch on our helpline number, which is 01202 847 609, and then we'll show you where to get them. Thank you.
Joe. Of course, alternatively, you can also click on our inquiry button on our website, and you can drop us a line, and we'll get back to you with the links that you might need. I've also just putting on there the link to our webpage. For those of you that haven't done it in chat before, if you run your mouse over my message that I've just put in and highlight it, you can copy and paste that into Word, or an email, or anything. So you can take that away with you, and you will find all of today's resources on there. And as Joe rightfully said, you'll also find all our previous 19, just to re-emphasize that, webinars, many of which have been specifically around health and safety within village halls. Were there any other questions, Joe?
No, I think you managed to answer them absolutely admirably. There's been
Look at that.
there's been nearly 100 comments been made on that group chat this morning, so that's an absolutely huge amount. That's really, really impressive.
Yeah.
And the fact that you've been able to keep up and answer everything as well.
Yeah,
That's absolutely incredible.
So, as I said before, if we have missed any, do forgive us, because obviously sometimes it just scrolls and you just miss someone. We will make sure that all the questions are answered, and the chat will be made available afterwards. We are here for you. That's our purpose, is to support you. We are purposeless if you don't contact us and ask us your questions. So do get in contact. Next week's webinar, we're going to be looking at trustee support and governance. We think it's a good time to have that conversation. I think with everything else that's been going on, it's very easy to miss some of the updates that have come through from the Charity Commission. So it's an opportunity to inform and also to give some guidance. We'll also be introducing some of the new ways that our services will be running as we move out of the phase that we're currently in COVID-19. We have learned so much from this experience as an organisation. I'm sure you have too. And we want to make sure that we apply all of the things that you've shared with us, all of the things that you've told us that you need, and make sure that we match that with the services that we offer. We will be offering more online than we have before, but we're very aware of digital exclusion and inclusion, and we will be making sure that there are still opportunities for face-to-face as we move further down the line. So this isn't the end of our webinars. We definitely plan to see you weekly until the end of August, and then there'll be some slight changes as we move into September. To find out what they are, I'm going to leave you on a cliffhanger. To find out what those changes are, please come along next week. It's been lovely to see you all. Thank you for those of you that have been with us right the way through the 20 weeks. What a journey. Thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing many of you next week. Thank you.